December 1971. The United States is at war in Vietnam. And while young men and women risk their lives in Asia, young men and women in this country protest that same war, causing significant civil unrest in the United States. Hello, my name is Christopher Gollin, and I would like to speak to you a little bit about what it was like to live in December of 1971. To start off with, I'd like to set the mood with what the economy and our popular culture was like during this time period. In December of 1971, the average annual income was $10,600. $10,600 for the average income of a household. Can you imagine a family of four today surviving on that meager income? Well, there were some other differences in 1971, and most of those had to do with cost of items, because they were significantly lower than they are today. For example, gasoline. Gasoline in 1971 was 40 cents a gallon. So if you had a large vehicle with a 20-gallon tank, it cost you $8 to fill that tank. Today, that same tank would cost you $40 to fill. So even though incomes were less, it was a lot less to live. Not just gas was lower. If you wanted to take your family of four to the movies, it would cost you $6 for those four tickets, $1.50 a piece. Today, the cost of a family of four to go to the movies, just for the tickets, is about 10 times that, not including soda and popcorn. So it was a much less expensive venture to go out and enjoy, say, James Bond's Diamonds Are Forever, which happened to come out in 1971. Also, it was a lot cheaper for families to own their own home than it is today. The average house in 1971 cost just over $25,000. And that is significantly lower than our housing costs today, and was much more commensurate with what they were making. Also at that same time, the popular culture was different. Although we still enjoyed movies, television, radio, and toys, they were very different than what we have today. For popular toys in 1971, well, for girls, most popular was still Malibu Barbie. But for boys, it was the Rock'em Sock'em Robot. Something I owned myself, even though it was several years later that I owned it. As far as music goes, in December of 1971, there were two songs that dominated the charts and were #1 hits in that month. They were Family Affair by Sly and the Family Stone and Brand New Key by Melanie. Music slightly different than what we listen to today. Now, even though the culture was different, finances were different, people were still living lives. Even though there was a war going on in Asia, which had many of our young men and women involved in it, there were a lot of other things still going on, specifically in December of 1971. Some of those things, on a global scale, had great importance to us even today. On December 2nd, the United Arab Emirates was formed. Also on that same day, the Mars 3 Russian spacecraft landed on Mars, being the first man-made object sent to that planet. But because of the war, and the action of the youth of the time, there was a great desire to stand up for what you believed in. And we saw that on December 11th with the John Sinclair Freedom Rally. John Sinclair was a man who had been convicted for having 2 marijuana cigarettes. But it wasn't the conviction that was the issue. It was the sentence. He was sentenced to 10 years in prison. That sentence created an uproar among the young people of this country. And it happened right at our very own University of Michigan. The John Sinclair Freedom Rally, which happened on December 11th, had many headliners, but none bigger than John Lennon and Yoko Ono, who both played at that rally. And the power of protest showed that it was very powerful indeed. Because shortly after this rally, John Sinclair was released. On December 12th, 2 important items of note happened. First was within the PGA Tour, when Bob Goalby won the Bahamas National Open. Second, and most important in my life, was my birth, happening on a Sunday on December 12th. Now, of course, when I came into this world at that time, it was different. Basically, it was cold and I was hungry, so I was crying. Hopefully, I am a lot more self-controlled and smarter about how I dress. On December 13th, the Socialist Party of Ireland was formed. On December 15th, Paul Levé, a French mathematician who is most notably known for his work on probability theory, died at the age of 85. On December 17th, as I mentioned before, the James Bond movie Diamonds Are Forever was released. Not everything was good in December, though, economically. On December 18th, the dollar was devalued for just the second time in history. A very big black mark on the U.S. economy. On December 24th, Christmas Eve, the now well-known pop singer Ricky Martin was born. But the year ended on a more global note. On December 31st, U Thant, who was the first non-European Secretary General to the United Nations, ended his position after 8 long years. So as you can see, December of 1971, there was a lot going on. Not just with the Vietnam War, with protests on campuses across this country, but we as a culture also had a lot going on. With movies, TV shows, popular radio, primarily with folk music, really dominating the charts. It was a time that must have been very interesting to be around in. And although I only saw the very tail end of 1971, it did show that this country could go forward from a very difficult time and come to a time when things are much more settled within this country. Which is hard to believe with the way things are going on today, but it really is. As a country, we are now much more unified than we were during this very tumultuous time. So I want to thank you for listening to my presentation about December of 1971, and I hope to speak with you all again very soon. Have a good evening.